Welcome. Do you ever think about wanting to get something more out of your life? And do you also want more calm and control? I'm here to share this message, and that is short-term goals will transform your life. They will help you see it with a new perspective. They will help you achieve pace, perspective, achievement, calm, and ultimately, excellence. I'm going to share a goal achievement method I created that's been used by individuals, teams, coaches, professionals of all kinds. And they have used it for all kinds of goals. And there are 4 essential elements. They're interrelated elements. They're almost like 4 wheels of a 4-wheel drive. They're independent and they're interrelated. Here's the first one. The goal, you begin with an experimental short-term goal based on a vision you have. Second, you keep records, a calendar. You keep 6-week goals in a calendar, and then you keep weekly goals in the calendar, and then track daily action steps. Third, and very important, you also have accountability and feedback with a meeting with a coach, a mentor, a friend, once a week at the same time every week, because it makes you very aware of time, both what happened in the past week and what happens in the next week. And finally, you review what you did in the 6-week period. This is the 4th essential component. What happened over the 6 weeks? So you can say, well, do I want to continue this goal or not? Do I want to do something else? Do I need to refine it? So this goal achievement method is rooted in physical goals. Why physical goals? Because it's used for all kinds of goals. Physical goals because they're more concrete, they're more measurable. They're less nuanced than personal and professional goals. And yet, the method works for all kinds of goals. So people, for example, recreational athletes have used it to run their first race, to learn to swim, to improve their tennis game. Elite athletes have used it to enter the Olympics, to qualify for the Olympic marathon trials, to win championships, etc. You get the idea. The exciting piece also is that the method gets people so excited because their achievements are measurable. I don't have to say you're doing a good job. They know they're doing a good job. That they have also written books, gotten promotions, built businesses. You know what I mean. They've achieved major life balance. And yet, it's not as if they don't encounter adversity. They do. I mean, job loss, illness, divorce, all kinds of things, real life stuff that everybody goes through, but yet they still achieve. So I'm going to tell you a story here with a roadmap. And there are 3 things we're going to point out. First, I'm going to tell you 5 ways in which short-term goal setting, because this is based in 6-week goals, as I said, short-term goal setting will help you have a sense of progress and help you achieve focus and help you develop better habits, help you get a greater sense of calm, and help you learn new strategies to solve problems. So you'll get all these benefits. So I'll tell you those, and then I'll develop those, and then I'll tell you the essentials of goal achievement that I've learned from my own life, from being an athlete and from being a professor and researcher, and from what I've learned from the terrific people whom I coach, who aspire to dreams and will embrace the short-term challenges that go with pursuing any goal. So, here are first 2 very different stories that I want to share with you because it shows how different the people are who use the method. It applies to everyone. So here are Inez and Peter. Inez has used the short-term goal method for 10 years to run track and field, and she's podiumed in national championships. She happens to be an orthopedic surgeon, so she's also used the method with her patients to help them know where they are after surgery to take steps to get better, so they know where they are. And she ran for office and used the method to run for office. Her husband, Peter, was so inspired, he started using the method too. And he said, oh, let's start biking. He had done lots of biking in the past. So together they started, 10, 15, 20-mile rides, and they built up to 50 or 60-mile rides. And last August, they biked 187 miles in the Pan Mass Challenge. Peter got so excited by the method, he said, all right, I'm going to get a job. And he got a job as an emergency reserve ecologist for FEMA. Very different story. Toby. The method works for people of all ages. He's 14. Hey, I want to do spring track, he said. Never run spring track. So anyway, he came to weekly meetings, kept the calendar, had his busy social life, his friends, of course, video games. So we said, all right, Toby, you got to do these things. But it was all reasonable goal setting, which is what the method is. Anyway, 6 weeks later, he dropped his two-mile time by 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And he and his mom were really happy because he spent less time on his video games and his grades were better. So, it affects the rest of our lives. It gives a sense of control and balance. Now, these are the ways that you can benefit. So you will experience progress with the short-term method more than you will with almost anything else. And we need a sense of progress. First of all, we're living longer than ever. In 1950, the average American lived to be 68, and 2021, it was 79. And time is our most precious commodity. We don't want to let it drift. So goals give us a sense of milestones and markers. And those milestones are, I once was talking to National Public Radio about goal achievement. I said, goals are like punctuation in books, periods, paragraphs, and chapters. They help us understand where we are in life. Remember, perspective is one of the goals, the gains from the method. So you will also improve focus. I mean, how many of you out there isn't overwhelmed with, texting, Snapchat, emails? I mean, it's crazy. We live a crazy life. It's really hard for me, and I know for many others, to focus. So, and Dr. Dan Levitin writes about this in his fabulous book, The Organized Mind. And he said because we don't focus enough, we end up multitasking, right? And multitasking is crazy. I mean, it inspires the stress hormone cortisol and the fight or flight hormone adrenaline to flood our brains. And he says it causes mental fog and scrambled thinking so that we feel that we're running fast just to stand still. You will focus more if you set a short-term goal. Next, these two stories illustrate the next points. You will learn more if you set a short-term goal because you will encounter challenges and you'll have to find solutions to them. So here on your left is Cheryl. Cheryl's goal was to hike the 48 4,000 footers in New Hampshire, mountain by mountain, challenge by challenge. She hiked through cancer. That goal kept her going. And she learned all kinds of new strategies. She took wilderness first aid. She learned more about elevation maps, how to use bike gloves with hiking poles, et cetera, et cetera. She learned more. Then there's Joe Malloy. I don't know if any of you know Joe. He was a student of mine at Boston College where he learned the short-term goal achievement method. He had always wanted to make the Olympics. And he was a swimmer, captain of the swim team, assistant swim coach at Boston College. Anyway, short-term goal by short-term goal, refining his habits was key. That's the point that his story illustrates. Refining his habits of hydrating, of sleep, of training for 3 different sports. He not only qualified for the 2016 Olympics in Rio, but he was the first American finisher. Fast forward to today, years later, he says the method has taught him the special value of time. And he's got 2 young daughters. He spends more quality time with his daughters because of this awareness than ever. The last point that to develop is that of the great calm we get from setting and achieving short-term goals. How many of us are just so busy and overwhelmed, have a lot going on, it's hard to get priorities and think of what do I have to do when? Francesca is someone who sits down in the morning. She, of course, uses the method, has done so for 10 years, meets every week, and sets her goals, and every morning she will sit down and say, all right, what do I have going on today? Because the reason that goals increase our sense of calm is that they remind us when to stress ourselves and when we need to recover, when we need to say, done enough. Well, she's got it going on, a lot going on. She is a professor of statistics at Harvard. She's co-director of the Harvard Data Science Initiative. She's a wife and mom, and she's an athlete. I mean, you pick up the New York Times and there's one of her research articles. She's all over the place, but she's got control. So in 10 years, she's run 10 marathons, she's done 20 half marathons, and the method inspired her to experiment with a short-term goal, to be a beginner again, which is one of the best things. She couldn't blow a bubble when she started, and well, she's finished by now 8 sprint and Olympic distance triathlons. And maybe most touching is she's grown a bigger heart. She understands adversity. So with her family and her students, when they encounter adversity, she says, I'm more empathetic. It's fantastic. So I'll share a little about my own experience as a researcher, as a human being, as an athlete, to tell you about short-term goal essentials so that you can leave here thinking about whether you might want to implement the short-term goal method. First is, I learned from neuroscience about the great importance, about the generation effect, the importance of creating our own goals, as opposed to just receiving instruction from others. So, the example of Nate here in the yellow shirt shows the generation effect. He came to me wanting to qualify for the Boston Marathon. He had tried for 3 years using an app, which gave him instructions about what to do, but failed. Then he used the method, and he lowered his marathon qualifying time from, in 6 months, 3 hours and 25 minutes to 2 hours and 55 minutes. He lowered it by 30 minutes. He's not the only one who's made these kinds of accomplishments. Then I also learned about the great importance in research and so forth of respecting tiny steps by saying, hey, yeah, it's really important to write down this tiny little detail. I would say, Cheryl, can you write down this detail of 8 to 10 such and suches? Yes, you got to do that. Not too many records, but essential ones. So James Clear writes a fantastic book, it's come out, called Atomic Habits. And he documents exactly how much short-term, tiny little action steps compound into really remarkable results. And then being accountable. So this is an interrelated goal achievement method. A lot of people write down goals, not everybody does, but putting them all together is what it's about. And Dr. Gail Matthews wrote a wonderful study, conducted a wonderful study, and found that those who not only write down their goals, but who also meet with someone regularly for feedback, are much more successful than those who just write down their goals. And by the way, in my doctoral dissertation, which I wrote on 103 national and world-class masters women runners, 94% of them wrote down their goals. And I myself have used this method with a coach, so I keep myself accountable too, as do all the people in my practice. So this is the end story, which suggests the end of a journey of what I learned about short-term goal achievement. First, I've always been a planner, and my husband found a journal the other day, and he said, oh my gosh, what's this? It was from 4th grade. It said, play the guitar from 4 to 4:30. All right, so there was the trace of this. I also loved to run, and I ran the neighborhood Olympics, very official, with the finish line being a crack in the sidewalk. But then I went to high school and to college, pre-Title IX, almost, before running was offered as a sport, and I knew I was fast. So I did other sports in high school and college. At any rate, I suddenly became 40, and I heard about masters running, and I was interested. And I also needed the method, but I didn't have it, so I had to create it. I'd done all this research on goal achievement and excellence in my dissertation. At any rate, my head was spinning. I did not have calm. I did not have pace at all. It was like, whew. So I had 2 young kids. My husband traveled quite a bit. I was in doctoral program. I was starting a coaching practice, and I was starting to try to run. So I started the method. And it proved my experience, what everyone else has found with this, which is that short-term goals will ultimately amaze you as they compound if you've set your ladder against the right wall. So I did achieve 10 national titles, 9 in track and field, and 1 in aquathlon and swimming. I started in swimming. I got a bronze and silver medal in world championships, age group championships. And, you know, I never would have thought I would be there. I also learned in my doctoral dissertation and in my own experience that you can be as fast after 5 to 7 years as those who did get the chance to go to the Olympic trials or the Olympics. That was very cool. So let's say you might want to go home and say, I'm going to try this method. I want to share an example of a calendar because this calendar illustrates how tiny the goals are. And it also illustrates the importance of what we call range goals. So here we have a runner, not a runner, a walker who wants to be a runner, and say they walk 10 miles a week. So this person is going to jog 3 to 4 days a week, and a total of 6 to 8 minutes with some walking. It's very, very small. And the reason for range goals is that range goals allow us to fail. I've failed so many times. We're just normal people. But we want to embrace flexibility and failure. So that's the kind of calendar you want to keep. You also want to find someone to meet with. And what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about what else is going on in the rest of your life. You're going to talk about maybe what challenges you anticipate. You want to talk about how you're going to evaluate your goal at the end of it. My practice has quite a number of forms that people use to support this, but you can do this on your own too with a friend. You need a committed friend. So my final message is, yes, anyone can experiment with the short-term goal method, and you can achieve pace, perspective, achievement, calm, and ultimately excellence. And I have no doubt that if you have any kind of idea of a goal in your mind now, you can have your first achievement tomorrow. And whether you're 14 or 94, you can identify a new starting line. Thanks very much.